The egg did not belong in the snow. It was gold at the base and white at the top, streaked with lines of pale amber, and it sat in a ditch between two broken trees like something the forest had coughed up and forgotten. Around it, in every direction, pieces of a ship were still burning. Metal panels, shattered glass, a wing strut, twisted like a wet reed, sticking out of a snowbank at an angle that made no sense. The crash had been fast. The ship had come down through the clouds at the wrong speed, clipping the ridge, and the ridge had done the rest. Nothing moved inside the wreck. The egg had rolled free when the cargo hold split open. It had tumbled down a slope of ice and dirt and come to rest in the ditch, half buried, cracked along one side. The crack was not fatal. Something inside was still breathing. You could not hear it, but the snow around the egg was slightly warmer than everywhere else. A small circle of melt, barely the width of a hand, ringed the bottom. The wolves found it before dawn. They came low through the tree line, 7 of them, led by a female with a grey coat and one torn ear. Her name, if wolves had names for each other, was something felt rather than said. She was the one who decided things. She moved to the egg first, sniffed it in a slow circle, then sat back and waited. The others waited with her. That was how the pack worked. She decided, and then time passed, and then the decision became real. When the egg began to move, she did not flinch. The crack along the side widened. A small claw appeared, pale gold, pushing outward. Then a second claw. Then a noise, not a roar, not yet, just a thin, desperate sound like something trying to remember how to breathe. The shell fell apart in pieces, and the thing inside spilled forward into the snow and immediately began to shake. It was small, smaller than any of the wolves. Its scales were ivory with faint gold along the spine and the edges of its wing folds, which were pressed flat against its back, wet and useless. Its eyes, when they opened, were amber. It blinked at the darkness and the snow and the 7 large shapes surrounding it, and it made the small, desperate sound again. The grey female stepped forward. She pushed her nose against the side of its head, firm, not rough, the way she greeted her own. The hatchling shook harder, then stopped shaking. She pressed her head into its neck and held it there for a moment, and the hatchling went still. That was how it began. They did not know what he was. They had no name for dragon. They had no memory of one, no instinct that said danger, no reflex that said wrong. He was small. He made a sound like something lost. He smelled of fire and cold metal and something older, something that sat in the back of the nose like the smell before a storm. The grey female had accepted stranger things. A pup with a broken leg once. A young deer that had followed the pack for 3 days before sense returned to it. She accepted the hatchling the same way, because he was small, because he was cold, because he had made the sound. They called him nothing, because they did not call each other things, but they learned his shape the way wolves learn all shapes, by living beside them. By the end of the first week, the pack moved around him the same way they moved around each other. He slept in the pile. He ate when they brought food. He stumbled after them through the snow on legs that were wrong for walking in it, and when he fell, one of them would stop and wait for him to get up. Seasons passed. He grew not the way a wolf grows faster, stranger. By the second winter, he was the size of a large dog. By the third, the size of a horse. His wings grew with him, folded against his back in a way that the wolves had simply stopped noticing. They were part of him the way his tail was part of him, the way the torn ear was part of the grey female, just a shape, just how he was. He never breathed fire, not once in those first years. Whatever lived inside him that could do that remained quiet, sleeping the way deep things sleep, waiting for something it had not yet felt. He hunted with them. He moved the way they moved, low, patient, reading the ground before trusting it. He had no language. He had no memory of what he was. He had the pack and the forest and the long, specific silence of a grey in winter, and that was the whole world. He did not know what he was missing. He did not know he was missing anything at all. The grey female did not know either. She knew only that the pack was complete. She knew only that the strange-shaped one with the folded wings ran beside her when she ran, and slept warm against her flank when the cold came in hard off the ridge, and that was enough. It was, for a long time, entirely enough. The tracks in the mud were wrong. Reed had been following the injured Greyman for 2 hours through the low valley, reading the prints the way he had been taught: pressure, depth, the small drag mark on the right side where it was favoring that leg. He was good at this. 3 years on Arden had made him good at this, even if the posting itself was considered a dead end by everyone back at the Conclave outpost. The wildlife station had 2 rangers. One of them had requested a transfer 4 months ago and was still waiting. Reed had not requested anything. He liked the quiet here. He liked the trees. The Greyman tracks merged with others near the bottom of the valley slope. Many others. The whole pack, it seemed, had come down this way overnight. Reed crouched and looked at the overlap of prints, reading the story they left. They had stopped here, moved in a loose circle, then continued north altogether, including the injured one. He followed north. The tree line ended at the edge of a wide clearing, sheltered on 3 sides by a ridge and open to the south, where a small stream ran between ice-crusted banks. The pack was there. He saw them before he heard them, 7 wolves in various positions of rest, some lying flat, some sitting, all in that particular state of alert but calm that Greymans held when nothing was threatening them. Then he saw what was in the center of them. Reed stopped walking. His hand did not go to his sidearm. It went to the trunk of the nearest tree, and he held it because his legs had made an unilateral decision to stay where they were. The dragon was lying on its side in the thin grass, one wing half extended and flat on the ground, head resting on its own foreleg the way a wolf rests. It was enormous, ivory gold, heavily built through the chest, with a long tail coiled loosely around the edge of its resting space. Its eyes were closed. The wolves around it were not afraid of it. The grey female with the torn ear was pressed against its side, asleep. Reed stood behind the tree for a long time. He ran through the standard protocol in his head: report unusual fauna contact, retreat to safe distance, await conclave assessment team. He knew the protocol. He had read the protocol. The protocol made complete sense from the inside of an office. He sat down at the base of the tree instead. Not in the clearing, at the edge where the shadow was, where he could see but was not fully visible. He set his pack beside him and opened his field kit slowly, making no sudden moves, and he took out a strip of dried meat and ate it quietly and watched. For the first hour, nothing changed. Then the dragon opened its eyes. Amber, Reed noted, wide set. The eyes moved across the clearing the way an animal's eyes move, gathering information, not thinking in language, just reading the space. They swept the tree line. They stopped. They found Reed. Reed did not move. He kept his hands visible and relaxed on his knees and looked back, not staring hard, not looking away. The middle way he had learned was best with animals that were still making up their minds about you. The dragon lifted its head. The grey female woke and looked at Reed too. She did not growl. She raised her muzzle, scented the air, and then looked at the dragon, as if checking what the dragon thought. The dragon was thinking. You could see it, the slight shift of weight, the way the nostrils worked, the ears that were not quite ears but small ridged openings above the jaw that moved independently like a cat's. It was reading him. Reed spoke quietly. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Take your time." He didn't know why he said it. He said it the way you say things to a frightened dog, not because you expect understanding, but because tone carries what words can't. The sound of a voice that isn't tightened by fear. The dragon lay its head back down. Not looking away, still watching, but no longer elevated, no longer in that in-between of flight or stay. It watched him the way the wolves watched, with the specific patience of a creature that has learned that most things become clear if you wait long enough. Reed came back the next day. He brought more dried meat and sat in the same spot. This time the dragon noticed him sooner but reacted less. The day after that, Reed moved 5 steps closer to the clearing's edge. The grey female glanced at him. The dragon raised its head, held it, then lowered it again. By the 6th day, Reed was sitting at the clearing's edge openly, in the light, eating his lunch. One of the younger wolves had crept close enough to sniff his boot and then retreated, satisfied. The dragon watched all of this from across the clearing with those amber eyes. On the 7th day, it got up and walked toward him. It stopped 4 feet away. Reed kept still. The dragon lowered its head until its nose was level with Reed's face and breathed out slowly across his hair. It smelled of pine and dry grass and something that had no name, like the air inside a very old stone room. Reed breathed back because it seemed like the right thing to do. He noticed then that the dragon's wings were undersized, that there was no scarring on the throat glands where fire would pass, that it moved entirely and without any trace of anything else, like a wolf. He sat with that understanding for a while. Then he pulled out his field log and started writing. He did not report it, not yet. He needed to understand what he was looking at first. 3 months in, Reed had filled 4 field logs. He had documented the pack's movement routes, the social hierarchy, the way Gora. He had named the grey female Gora, because naming things was how he kept his notes organized, managed disputes within the group with nothing more than posture and proximity. He had documented Solis the same way, because Solis needed a name too, and Sol meant sun in an old Earth language, and the scales were gold when the light hit them right. He had also documented something he could not fully explain. It had started small. Reed would be sitting in the clearing, writing, and he would feel something, not a sound, not a sight, just a pressure at the edges of his thoughts, like the moment before a memory arrives. He had ignored it at first, assumed it was fatigue or the particular strange loneliness of a long solo posting. Then one afternoon Solis had walked up beside him and lain down, and the pressure had become something more like an image, not clear, not in words. Just the feeling of warmth and closeness, and something Reed could only describe as the color green, even though he hadn't been looking at anything green. He had written in his log, subject may have low-range telepathic capability, presenting as emotional impression rather than communication. Not consistent with known Drakari developmental patterns, will observe further. What he hadn't written was, it feels like having someone sit beside you who is very glad you exist. The crisis came on a grey afternoon in the 8th week. The pack was moving through a stretch of lower forest, Solis ranging at the edge of the group, the way he always did, close but not central, a wolf habit that suited his size. Reed was 200 meters behind, following at the distance the pack had come to accept as his natural position. He heard the stoneback before he saw it. It came out of the tree line to the east, a massive armored creature, 3 meters at the shoulder, built like a wall with legs, and it had found the pups. Tusk and 2 others were in the shallow end of the creek bed when the stoneback charged. The adult wolves moved fast, but they were too spread out. Solis moved faster. He crossed the ground in a flat sprint and hit the stoneback from the side with his shoulder, which was the way Gora had taught him to knock a large animal off its feet, not claws, not teeth first, just mass and angle. The stoneback staggered. Tusk scrambled up the bank. The stoneback righted itself and turned on Solis, and Solis did something Reed had never seen him do. He reared up. Not a wolf movement, not anything the pack had taught him, something older, something that lived in his bones without his knowing it was there. He reared up to his full height with his wings half spreading for the first time in his life, and the sound that came from his throat was not a howl. It was fire. Not a controlled stream, a burst, orange-gold, thick, violent, roaring sideways because his head had turned when he let it out. It caught the tree line, bark ignited. Dry grass caught immediately, and the flames ran along the ground for 30 meters before the wet earth stopped them. The stoneback bolted. The forest smelled like burned pine and shock. Solis stood in the middle of it, sides heaving, and looked at his own 4 feet as if they belonged to someone else. The pack was still, not fleeing, just still, watching him. He made a sound Reed had never heard from him, low, fractured, the sound of something that doesn't know what just happened to it. He backed away from the burn mark. Then he circled it. Then he backed away again. His wings, which had half opened for the first time in his life, folded down slowly, and he pressed them to his sides as if trying to make himself smaller. Gora crossed the clearing. She pressed her head into his neck. Firm, present, pack. He was still breathing hard when she did it, still shaking, and she held her head there and waited the way she always waited, completely calm, completely certain. Reed crossed the clearing too. His heart was going fast. His hands were steady because he had spent 3 years on Arden learning to keep his hands steady. He walked to Solis's other side and pressed his palm flat against the scales above the elbow joint, where Solis's heat came through strongest. And the thing that came through, the pressure, the image, the wordless feeling, was enormous. It hit Reed like opening a door into a storm. Not pain, not anger, just size. The feeling was too large for the container. Confusion at a scale Reed didn't have a word for. Loneliness that wasn't one moment, but the accumulated weight of years of not knowing what you were. And underneath all of it, running like a wire through everything, the pure animal question. What am I, what am I, what am I? Reed stood in it. He didn't step back. He let it land on him the way weather lands, completely, without managing it. Then he said, out loud, to the dragon and the wolves and the burning trees and the grey sky, I don't know either, but we'll figure it out. Solis's breathing slowed. Reed didn't move his hand. 2 days later, Reed filed a wildlife incident report with the outpost. Fire event, large fauna, no casualties. He listed the cause as unknown. In his personal log, he wrote something different. He is not undeveloped. He is differently developed. There is a gap between what he is and what he knows himself to be, and it is not his failure. It is just the shape of what happened to him. I think someone needs to know about this, but I want to be the one who tells them. Not yet, but soon. The ship came down on the outpost landing pad like it owned the ground it touched. It was a conclave vessel, sleek, silver, with the double-bar emblem of a diplomatic escort along its hull. Behind it, a second and smaller ship, darker, older, bearing the deep blue sigil of the Drakari Elder Council. Reed watched them land from the doorway of the ranger station with a cup of water going cold in his hand. He had filed his report 3 weeks ago, a careful, detailed report, 22 pages. He had included behavioral logs, communication notes, the fire incident, the telepathic observations. He had framed it precisely. Subject is an adolescent Drakari with non-standard development due to Grayman Pack imprinting, demonstrates full cognitive and emotional complexity. Strongly advise careful assessment before any intervention. The response had come back in 4 days. Thank you for your report. A delegation will attend. That was all. 2 figures stepped off the Drakari ship. The first was Elder Davan, tall even for a dragon in humanoid form, which the Elder Drakari preferred for diplomatic contact, scales a deep blue-green, robes the color of old copper. He moved the way very old, powerful things move, without hurry, because nothing had made them hurry in a long time. The second was Ambassador Kale, from the Conclave's diplomatic office. Reptilian, slim, quick-eyed, wearing an expression that Reed had seen on bureaucrats across 6 species, polite interest with impatience just underneath. Colonel Briggs was there too, Reed's commanding officer, arrived by shuttle the day before, who had spent that day telling Reed in various calm and increasingly firm ways that the situation needed to be handled smoothly, and that smoothly meant deferring to the Drakari. Davan looked at Reed and said, without greeting, "Where is he?" Reed had brought Solis to the outpost clearing the morning before. Solis had come because Reed asked, the way he always came when Reed asked, not from command, but from something quieter. The pack had followed to the edge of the forest and stopped there. Gora sat at the tree line with her ears forward. Solis was in the clearing now. He heard the ship land. He did not move toward it. He watched it the way he watched unfamiliar things, low, patient reading. When Davan came around the corner of the station building and saw him, the elder stopped walking. Solis had never seen another dragon. He raised his head. His nostrils worked. Something moved across his face, recognition of a kind, maybe, the smell of his own species for the first time in his life. Davan stepped forward and spoke to him in Drakari. The old language, the language that was supposed to live in dragon blood, the way breathing lived in the body. Solis stared at him. He did not respond, not because he was being defiant, because he did not understand a word. Davan turned to Reed. The expression on the elder's face was controlled, but Reed had learned to read expressions through scales and different bone structures. It was grief, briefly, and then it was something harder. "This is what your report failed to capture," Davan said. "He has been ruined." "He has been raised," Reed said. "By animals. By a family." Ambassador Kale stepped in smoothly, the way diplomats step into corners. "The Drakari have a clear claim here. The individual is a Drakari citizen, born of Drakari parents who are now deceased. He is a minor by their developmental standards. They have the right to oversee his integration. He is a sapient being who has lived on this planet for his entire life and has formed genuine social bonds," Reed said. "That has legal weight." "You are a ranger," Kale said. "A human ranger on a Tier 3 posting. You have no standing in Drakari matters." "I have 4 months of documented evidence and an obligation under the Conclave's own charter." Briggs put a hand on Reed's arm. "Reed, stand down." Reed looked at Briggs. Briggs had kind eyes and a career to protect, and 3 years until retirement, and none of that was a character flaw. It was just what it was. Reed looked back at Kale. "I am formally invoking Article 9 of the Sapient Welfare Charter," he said. "Any registered conclave observer may call for an independent developmental assessment before a sapient being is relocated against demonstrated behavioral bonds. That assessment must be completed before any relocation occurs. That is not my opinion. That is the charter." "Silence." Kale's expression shifted. Not anger, something more like the face of a person who has found an insect in an unexpected place, surprised and recalibrating. Davan was very still. "That provision," Kale said carefully, "is almost never invoked." "There's no clause that says it can't be," Reed said. Briggs let go of his arm. Reed heard the colonel breathe out through his nose, long and slow. During all of this, Solis had moved. No one had noticed. He had crossed the clearing in complete silence, wolf-quiet, old habit, and was standing directly behind Reed, not aggressively, not posturing, just there, the way Gora stood between the pack and anything uncertain. Davan looked at Solis for a long moment, then at Reed. "You are protecting him," the elder said. It sounded like an observation, not an accusation. "Yes," Reed said, "that's exactly what I'm doing." Kale arranged the assessment through his office that afternoon. Reed sent the formal filing from the outpost terminal, attached his full 22-page report, and added an appendix with field video, behavioral charts, and the communication logs he had built up over 4 months. It was 41 pages in total. Briggs came to find him afterward. He stood in the doorway of the ranger station and looked at Reed for a while without saying anything. Then he said, "Do you know what you've done to your career?" Reed looked up from his terminal. "I know what I would have done to it if I'd walked away." Briggs didn't answer that. He left. Outside, Solis was sitting at the edge of the clearing facing the forest, where Gora was still waiting at the tree line. The two of them were looking at each other across the distance, the dragon and the wolf, in the particular silence of creatures who have said everything they need to say and are just holding the shape of it. Reed watched them for a moment, then went back to his paperwork. He had a lot of it left. The assessor's name was Oran, and she arrived without warmth and without malice, which Reed respected. She was from a species called the Vethani, small, four-armed, with grey skin and large pale eyes that blinked sideways. She had conducted sapient welfare assessments for 19 years, and she had the manner of someone who had seen every possible version of every situation and found most of them adequately explained by careful measurement. She set up her equipment in the outpost meeting room, placed her data pads in a specific order, and told Reed she would need 5 days. She tested Solis in the outpost clearing because Solis would not go indoors. She began with language. She spoke to him in 6 different sapient languages, including Drakari. She used visual symbols alongside the words. She tried stimulus response sequencing, which was a softer way to test whether a being could map meaning to sound. Solis watched all of it with his amber eyes and did not respond to any language. He understood tone. When Oran's voice went flat and procedural, he watched her hands. When her voice shifted pattern, his ears moved. But the languages themselves landed on him like sounds in a language he had never heard, because they were. Oran wrote, language acquisition not present, non-standard. She tested flight. He could get off the ground now. He had managed that in the weeks since the fire incident, short uneven bursts with no grace and no control. Oran measured wingspan, lift capacity, maneuver response. She wrote, flight capability, limited, uncontrolled, early developmental stage only. She tested fire. He produced it, reluctantly, at a target she set at the far end of the clearing. It was still uncontrolled, wider than it should be, hot but unformed. She wrote, elemental output, present but not shaped. She tested telepathic range and contact. She brought a calibrated psionic sensor and had Solis stand in a series of measured distances from it. The sensor barely moved. She had Reed stand at different distances and checked what the sensor read when Solis looked at him. The sensor moved considerably. She checked twice, 3 times. She wrote, telepathic range, anomalously narrow. Bond to human subject Reed demonstrates depth and stability inconsistent with early development. Anomalous. By standard Drakari metrics, Solis was failing everything. Elder Davan attended the 3rd day of testing. He stood at the edge of the clearing with his arms folded and watched in silence, and his face was very difficult to read. Ambassador Kale had brought a junior aide who took notes and tried to look like he was not taking notes. Then Oran moved to the 2nd phase. She placed objects on a flat table in front of Solis and watched what he did with them. He investigated each one, sniffed, pushed with his nose, picked up a smooth stone with surprising delicacy and turned it over. She changed the arrangement when he was not looking. He noticed immediately and rearranged 2 of the items into what appeared to be a different but internally logical order. She wrote, abstract pattern recognition, high. She played a sound recording. It took her 3 careful days to get it, a recording of one of the Greymin pack, a specific howl pattern she had isolated from Reed's field audio. Not Gora, not Tusk. One of the wolves that had died in the first winter Reed had documented, whose absence the pack had noted in their movement patterns. Solis went completely still when he heard it. Then he made a sound that was neither wolf nor dragon, something between. He paced to the edge of the clearing and stood there with his back to everyone. His tail moved low and slow, the wolf way, not aggression, just wait. Oran wrote, grief response, present and acute, strong social memory. She tested protective decision-making by placing Tusk, the young wolf, who had been brought in from the tree line for this specific purpose, between Solis and an unfamiliar piece of equipment that made sudden noise. Solis moved between them before Oran had finished activating the device. Not fast, not aggressive. Just inserted himself the way the pack had always inserted themselves between each other and uncertain things. She wrote, protective prioritization of social bond, instinctive and immediate. Then she did the theory of mind test. She placed a stone in front of Solis, watched him look at it. Then she picked it up and looked at it herself, making her own curiosity visible, turning it, examining it. She set it back down. Solis watched her face during all of this. Then he found a 2nd stone and brought it to her and set it carefully in front of her. He had understood that she found the stone interesting. He had found her another. Oran was quiet for a long moment. She wrote, theory of mind, confirmed. Subject reads internal states of others and responds to them. Full sapient cognition present across all non-language metrics. Developmental pathway is non-standard. It is not compromised. On the final day, she read her preliminary conclusion aloud. Standard practice. Davan challenged it. He was composed and precise about it. He said the bond with Reed was a distortion, an imprint formed in the absence of the subject's true kind, that it would fade when Solis learned what he actually was, that what looked like development was actually a deviation that needed correction before it became permanent. Solis had been still through all of this. He had the habit, learned from Gora, of waiting while uncertain things resolved themselves. Then he tried to speak. It was visible, the effort of it. His throat worked in a way it had never worked before. The Drakari language was built for a vocal structure he had never used, and the wolf sounds he had lived in were shaped for a different kind of mouth. But something in Davan's voice, in the shape of the argument about what Solis was and was not, about what was real in him and what was wrong, had reached something. The word came out broken, the consonants were wrong, but it was a word. He said, "Read." Just that, looking directly at Davan. The clearing was very quiet. Oran set down her data pad. She looked at Solis, then at Reed. Then she picked up her data pad again and added one final line to her report. Subject's first volitional speech act was the name of the human who remained. She closed the file. "My assessment stands," she said to the room, to Davan, to Kale, to no one in particular. "The charter applies." The ruling came back in writing, which was how the conclave did everything that mattered. Reed read it at his terminal, while Solis sat outside in the grey morning air, watching a beetle cross a flat stone with the same patient attention he gave everything worth watching. The ruling was 2 pages of formal language, and it said, essentially, the subject cannot be relocated without demonstrated consent. As the subject has been assessed as sapient, the subject has the right to choose his own residence and social bonds. Any attempt to remove him by force will constitute a violation of Article 9. Reed printed it. He was not sure why he printed it. He just wanted to hold it in his hands. Davan came to him that afternoon, not with Kale, not with an aide, alone, which Reed had not expected. The elder moved to the edge of the clearing and stood there, and Reed came out and stood near him, and they looked at Solis together without speaking for a while. Then Davan spoke, and it was different from anything he had said in the assessment room. He told Reed what the Drakari were, not as argument, as fact, the way someone tells you about a country they were born in. He spoke about fire shaping, which was not just flame, but a form of making Drakari built with fire, made tools with fire, made art. He spoke about the sky, about what flight meant at full ability, not the scrambling short bursts Solis managed now, but the deep travel, crossing cloud banks, reading thermals, the specific freedom of something that had not yet been felt. He spoke about the language that was older than the conclave, older than the treaties, the language that carried the history of the Drakari, the way rings carry the history of a tree. He spoke about what Solis had not yet become. And then he said, quietly, he should know what he is. Reed said, he already knows what he is. Davan looked at him. He is someone who protects his family, Reed said, someone who notices when another person is curious and tries to give them more to be curious about, someone who stayed on a burning hillside because the wolves didn't run from him. He knows all of that. The fire and the flight and the language, those are things he hasn't learned yet. They are not what he is. Davan was quiet for a long moment. You are not what I expected, the elder said finally, from a human. People keep saying that, Reed said. The formal session was held the following morning in the outpost meeting room, which was too small for the occasion, but was what they had. Oran presented her report. Kale acknowledged the ruling. Davan made one final statement, formal, for the record, reiterating his position that Solis should be brought into Drakari society. And then they asked Solis. Not in words, Oran had developed, over the 5 days of assessment, a system of simple signals, gestures that carried rough meaning, learned from watching how Solis communicated with the pack. She showed him this direction or that direction. She pointed at the Drakari ship. She pointed at the forest. Solis did not look at either thing she pointed at. He walked to the door of the meeting room and pushed it open with his nose. Old habit, wolf habit, the way you open things when your hands are paws, and stepped outside into the pale morning light. Gora was there. She had come to the edge of the clearing again. She sat in the specific upright stillness that Greymans used when they were waiting for something they expected to arrive. Solis crossed the clearing to her. He pressed his face into her neck, the way she had done to him on the burning hillside years ago, the way she had done to him on the night he hatched into cold and confusion and found something warm anyway. He held it there for a long time. Then he lifted his head and turned back. He walked through the clearing. He passed Davan, who watched him with that expression that was grief and something underneath the grief that might have been, eventually, something else. He passed Kale, who was writing notes with the focused detachment of someone who would have an interesting report to file. He passed Briggs, who had not said a word since the ruling and was looking at Reed with the face of a man quietly revising his opinion of something. Solis sat down beside Reed. And that was the choice. It did not need a speech. It did not need a ceremony. It was the oldest kind of decision, the kind that lives in the body before the mind catches up, the kind that a wolf makes when it turns back toward the pack. Davan left that afternoon, but he came back. Not in a week, in 3 months. He came alone, with no diplomatic party, and he began to teach Solis the Drakari language slowly, with the patience of something that had existed long enough to know that slowness was not failure. Solis was a difficult student in the way all students are difficult when the material is genuinely hard. He learned the words one at a time, fitting them into a mouth that had learned different shapes first. By the 8th month, he could hold a simple conversation. By the end of the first year, he was dreaming in 2 languages. He learned to fly, not quickly, not gracefully at first, but the thermals above the Arden Ridge were consistent, and he learned their patterns the way he had learned the forest floor, by walking them until they were known. He learned fire shaping. He burned a lot of things he hadn't meant to burn. Reed moved his field kit to a different shelf. Tusk grew into a full greymane. In the evenings, when the light went low and orange over the ridge, he would howl from the valley, the long particular note that meant the pack was settling, that the day was closing, that all was well within the borders of what was theirs. Solis would raise his head and howl back, not a dragon sound, a wolf sound, the one he had learned first, the one that lived deepest. Reed would sit on the outpost steps and listen to it, the dragon speaking wolf to the valley answering, and he would not move until the echo finished. A junior conclave official visited near the end of that first year and asked Reed, with genuine curiosity, what it had been like to raise a dragon. Reed thought about it. "I didn't raise him," he said. "The wolves did, I just didn't lave." The official wrote it down carefully in her notes and then looked up. "Is that all?" Reed looked out at the clearing, where Solis was lying in the afternoon light with Tusk pressed against his side, both of them asleep, the dragon and the wolf at rest, in the old uncomplicated way of creatures who have decided, without discussion, that they belong to the same world. "That's all," Reed said. "It was enough." The official filed her report. She noted the outcome as unusual. She was not wrong. She just didn't know yet that unusual was the only word the galaxy had ever found for humans doing the thing that humans did, staying when it cost something, for no reason that fit neatly in a report, because something needed them to. It was never strategic. It was never calculated. It was just what they did.